Happy March, everybody, and welcome to the So What podcast. This month we got pretty deep with our topic of guilt and shame, and we really hope that it is a good conversation to maybe start some of your own conversations. We would love to have you interact with us on social media, especially after this kind of conversation, this tough conversation. It's the whole reason for the podcast, bringing nuanced conversations, things that most people don't really want to or get the chance to talk about. Anyhow, let's jump right in.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, everybody.
Oh, goodness.
It makes me smile and laugh. Hey, Kelly, how's it going down there?
Great. As long as I can keep my connection up, we are good.
Good.
Awesome.
It's not like we haven't been struggling with it for the last only 2
Electronics
minutes.
are my friend.
No more than 2 minutes.
Do you ever feel responsible when your electronics aren't working?
It depends on the situation. Yeah, if I have
Okay.
if I have an online session with a client and my connection is bad, yes. If their connection is bad, no.
Yeah, I meant just if your connection isn't working or if you're having trouble with technology,
It definitely frustrates me.
We live in a world where everything is, well, a lot of things are technology driven now. And we all understand when you sign on to Zoom and it's when it decides to update the app and you had no idea before you signed on.
Yeah.
So.
But I spend my day trying to get kids to log onto the internet and stay connected when they don't really want to be connected. So they, of course, have no ability to troubleshoot. The instant there's even slowness, they can't troubleshoot it. They just, hand goes up, the internet's not working. I don't have to do this, right? It's like, no, that's not how that works. You will retry and retry and retry that one video you need to show your buddy. But the second you need to upload a homework piece, oh, sorry, the internet didn't work. I guess it's broken. I can't turn it in now. Oh, well.
Yeah. All right. Well, happy March, y'all. Yeah. I have a question for you. A fun one, and no fake altruism. If you found a leprechaun's pot of gold, what would you do with it? What would you buy?
Well, first, I resist the idea that there would be any fake altruism from any of us. I think we would be honestly and totally altruistic.
Think so?
Oh, yeah? Well, that's not as fun. What fun thing would you do? Or get,
can I pay off my student loans? Is that that's fun to me.
Yeah, not being in crippling debt.
No, you need to get a better definition.
We have different definitions of fun.
What'd you say, Britt?
Not being in crippling debt would be a definition of fun for me. So,
yeah.
I mean, the student loans they're just kind of always there.
This is why I prefaced it with, what fun thing would you do? No altruism, no...
You just said altruism. Paying myself...
Yeah, that's still me.
I guess not. Paying somebody else
what
for
would
money
you do,
that
Kevin?
was for me.
Maybe you'll inspire us.
I guess so.
I would buy somebody else
altruistic.
a house.
Who are you buying a house for?
Yeah, exactly. Same thing as y'all. I would pay off my student loans.
Who are you buying a house for,
but do
Kevin?
something fun. You got a pot of gold. I was making it up. I wouldn't buy a house for anybody. So yeah, I think I would buy myself a house, maybe a whole mountain up in North Carolina. A lot of land, a big house for we only have a few kids. And so a giant Johnson compound, Mount Johnson, and that we could just have fun and play on. And I could go vacation there whenever I wanted to.
That'd be fun. I think I could get behind I would buy our dream vacation mountain house the ones that we look at all the time and talk about buying, or maybe not in the U.S. Maybe we'd use it to move out of the country.
Yeah.
Or get a place out of the country, and then
I gotta
have that ease of opportunity to go if we needed to.
Ooh, I would buy an island.
See, I think
Caribbean
I
somewhere.
would buy.
If I had a pot of gold, I would buy an island. Yeah.
See, I like those. I think I want to travel so much that I think what I would buy would be a really big and super awesome yacht. And then I have my vacation space that also takes me places as well.
Britt, do you know how to yacht?
I don't know how to, but you said a pot of gold, and I'm assuming that's a lot of gold. So I would be I would be paying for a captain.
To buy a captain too.
Okay. You would hire a staff?
Right. Well, yeah.
I resisted the buying people, Kelly. I was going more
higher would
staff,
make more sense.
Yeah, that's where Kelly goes. So
should we talk about what was happening when I signed on today?
Sure. Yeah. Let's talk about that. Yeah. Britt and I were having very interesting conversations about how our technology works.
Yes.
Yours doesn't. So, yeah. All right. So what is our topic this month, y'all?
I think we had talked about shame. We had talked about talking about shame and guilt, I think, needs to be brought in there too. And that's where it ended, because that is not a super easy topic to talk about.
I would say, yeah. So it's interesting. Shame and guilt go hand in hand, but they shouldn't. They're like, the definitions are distinct, but I think too often our society likes to lump them together. And I wonder if we do that as well as individuals. Like, don't draw a line between guilt and shame. I got some strong feelings about guilt versus shame. So, all right. So, stealing a little bit from Brene Brown. So, guilt has to do with the decision that you made, like a thing you did or didn't do. And so, like, I feel guilty that I ran a stop sign on the way to work because I was running late. And so I made a bad decision, however you want to phrase that. That's guilt. Shame is, because I ran that stop sign, I am a bad person. So one, guilt is about decisions that we do or like those things. And then shame speaks more to like our self-worth. And I tell people that I think guilt is a good thing, because guilt can let you know when you've made the wrong decisions. Guilt can motivate you to do things different in the future, whether that's stop doing things that are hurting you or others, or starting to do things that benefit you or others. When shame gets involved, it is a diminishing of your self-worth.
Makes sense to me.
Does that make sense?
I don't think for me it's conflated. I think for the majority of people I talk to, it's conflated though, because while to consolidate the definition, guilt is something you do and shame is something you are. I spend most of my time talking to people who are within the queer community or dealing with religious recovery. And in that, the majority of them are spending their time sort of untangling the things that the church has taught them. And most of them would say that if they have done something wrong, then they are bad people. So it's all the same. And that's kind of what they've learned in their life, is that doing wrong makes them bad, because that's how sin works. And that's how they've sort of interpreted. So guilt and shame don't really have a separation for them, which is how it affects their self-esteem, and it's how that affects their understanding of self-worth, and which by definition then kind of makes guilt not quite so good. In what it speaks to as far as social contract, I think that guilt has a part to play in society as a whole. I have yet to find a situation where someone tells me they feel guilty about something and it's an appropriate feeling. I can honestly say that I have no recollection of someone telling me they feel guilty about something and it was an appropriate feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to ask all kinds of questions about
I
that. I
wouldn't.
don't want you to like
I would
break
tell you if I
any
can't answer it. Yeah,
like
I won't
ethics
break any
thing.
confidences.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, yeah, so is it because you don't think the things that they're
Well,
reporting are worth feeling guilty over, or that they are making a bigger deal
it's
out
not
of
even
it
just clients,
than
it's
they
friends
should?
and family and stuff
I'm trying to
too.
get out.
Yeah, things that people tell me like they feel
Right,
guilty
yeah.
about this or they feel guilty about that. It's things that they don't need to feel guilty about. It's like I feel guilty about saying no. I feel guilty about telling someone I need this. I feel guilty about putting up a boundary. I feel guilty. Yeah, it's stuff they do not need to feel guilty about.
This brings me back. We last month we talked about the imposter syndrome and stuff, and I had shared about you know ADHD and some of the the things that happen with that, the places that I've dropped balls, and how I so often internalize that as meaning that I was a bad person or that I had failed morally some way, rather than I was just guilty for dropping the ball and not doing something I needed to do, and then that healthy feeling going, okay, we'll try harder next time, find some tools to fix that. But instead, it was no, I'm bad. I'm just not good at uh, life or whatever. Or it's. I think there were times that it was both. I'm not good at life or being an adult or whatever. And then there are other times that it was truly, really really did truly feel like being a
Mm.
bad person. And yeah, I totally agree with the difference that there is a big difference between the two of those things. And they are conflated in general in society,
Yeah.
but sometimes I think they're purposely
Hmm.
conflated.
Oh,
Whether
yeah.
they're purposely
Yeah.
conflated, it like I don't want to always decide that somebody has poor motives. Also, if that's something they're doing on a regular basis in order to control, whether their motives are quote good or not doesn't matter
Mm.
to me anymore, because they're using it to control. They're using it
Yeah.
as a weapon, and that really well it really it bothers me a lot, and it's something in teaching. I was actually just dealing with it today. I have a student who is a relatively bright kid, but he has struggled in school because of not always being able to focus and stuff. But he has internalized this: I'm just bad
Mm.
at school. I can't do this. I'm a bad kid. I'm not good. And the dark spiral that surrounds him when he feels like he made a mistake, that just goes down and down and down until he just is completely paralyzed. And it's a math test. That's not the end of the world if he doesn't do well on it right now. And it continues to be a struggle for me to build him up and build him up and build him up. And I often see that spiral that happens in him about a math test, and it's really easy to see it and connect it to those bigger times in my life where I was doing the same thing about stuff that probably in the grand scheme of things matters as much as
Mm.
that math test, if not less than. And yet I had those same kind of feelings of like deep
Yeah.
shame for something that I should not have even at times should not have even felt guilt about, let alone shame. It's been a big part of my own deconstruction journey to regularly stumble across those areas and go, "Oh my gosh. I I've been feeling shame for something like this or whatever for years that I never needed to feel in the first place." And I wish it was just an easy, like, okay, well, I'm done now. I no longer feel shame for that. But it takes like regular work to undo
Mm.
that damage.
Let me ask kind of a related question here. Do you think guilt is ever appropriate? And do you think shame is ever appropriate? Britt, as you were
Um,
talking, I was kind of mulling
yeah,
through that?
I think there are many times that guilt can be appropriate in the sense of that internal voice when we did something against either ourselves or another that says, hey, that probably wasn't the right direction to go, whatever that thing was, and most of the time people think of that as this outside. It's always like, I didn't hold the door open for somebody. I hesitate with the did nots as far as guilt goes, because
Right.
it's something that I've struggled with before, where I said, well, I didn't do this thing, when doing that thing wasn't a do or don't do. It's more when it's something I did where I wronged another or wronged myself, and then there's some damage to the relationship that happens, where the guilt can be a signifier of, hey, this is a broken relationship, or this is a problem within a relationship that needs to be addressed. As far as shame goes, I don't think it is appropriate. I can't even think of a time that shame was a thing that led to something good as an outcome. In that sense, bad things happen, and there's a lot of reasons why. I'll just use an example. Like, we drive and driving can be frustrated. And I have yelled at people before and flicked people off before and cursed. And okay, maybe I should, be able to not yell at some other person. I don't know what their day is having. There's no reason. Maybe they didn't notice me. Maybe there's all kinds of things like that. But to that guilt to turn into shame of, I'm just a bad person, I can't control my anger, I'm that, there's nowhere positive that goes. Whereas with the guilt, it's like, okay, maybe I need to check myself and recognize that other people are living a different journey, and maybe they didn't see me, or they weren't thinking about it, or maybe they're in a rush for some good reason, and I don't need to be so angry about whatever it is because they cut me off or didn't go through a red light as quickly as I wanted them to.
I think that I differentiate between feeling bad and feeling guilty. And because of that, I would say no, there is not a time that feeling guilt or feeling shame would be appropriate.
Okay. So what is the difference for you between guilt and shame? Or are they synonymous?
I don't think that they're synonymous, but I think it is very open to individual interpretation. But I think the reason that neither of them have appropriate places is because they're too easily used by other people for coercive control and manipulation.
So is there a sense of like needing to redeem those words for what they actually are, or just allowing people, or just recognizing that because of the history with them and the history of, I'm trying to remember what you said, coercive control. Do you think there's any benefit in trying to redeem those words, or because of its loaded history, just get rid of it completely and use?
I think as long as entities like the church are using guilt and shame, and as long as an entire political party is using shame, and a group of people is using shame on a whole gender expression, there's no redeeming the words.
So there's no redeeming guilt because of how synonymous it is with shame.
I don't see how.
I'm understanding.
Yes, I do not see how it would be possible. You don't see how? In the current situations that we are in, I do not see a possibility for that to happen from my perspective.
You mentioned that you draw a distinction between guilt and feeling bad. Can you talk more about that feeling bad?
Yeah, I mean, it's a small distinction. Yeah. And I think it's a very personal one. because I think it depends on person's relationship with guilt. Like you were saying, feeling guilty about a relationship that needs to be mended, right? Like a feeling guilty about having an argument with someone, say, right? Feeling guilty about it brings to mind the part of it where you've done wrong, you must, I don't know, you must repent, you must fix, whereas feel bad about it like alleviates the requirement for action and allows for action to be a choice.
I see what you mean. So the guilt carries the connotation of it must be fixed, whereas feeling bad is you have the opportunity to fix. Okay. I can see how that, I understand that, yeah.
What do you think, Kevin? Do you think that there's places where guilt and or shame are appropriate?
Yeah, yeah, because I have different definitions than you do. I think guilt and feeling bad are synonymous, and shame is the next step, the unhealthy step of that. So, and I will tell you that I'm coming into this because I knew what our topic was. I knew we were going to be talking about this because, otherwise I'm just flying blind. I had these thoughts in my head. Okay, yeah, we're talking about shame tonight. I want to make sure we differentiate between guilt and shame. And so guilt is beneficial at times. Shame is never beneficial. And the way that I would define it is that guilt is that internal feeling of knowing that whatever word we want to use to just kind of simplify it, a bad choice was made. So a lot of times I'm thinking of like talking to my little kids. And I think that's helpful for adults too. You feel guilty because you did a bad thing, and you can define that however you want to. And so what you decide to do with that guilt is up to you. And I think guilt is good in motivating us to do better in the future. When it bleeds over to shame is when it, as I said earlier, it chips away at your self-worth. So when I asked the two of y'all, I was trying my hardest to think of a time that shame would be beneficial. And the only thing that I came up with, and I don't know if I agree with this, but the only thing I came up with is somebody that has done one of the like real big societal evils. Pick your thing that you just don't think you could forgive somebody of. So pedophile, a murderer, molester, hate crimes, whatever. So would that person feel shame? And would that shame be beneficial for them to feel? I know what I want to say. I want to say good for them for feeling shame, and hopefully that will motivate them. And I don't know that that is a healthy.
Are shame and regret different?
Yeah, they are. Yeah. So shame, I think shame keeps coming back for me I don't think shame is ever good. Like I am unworthy of friendship or love or forgiveness or any of that. Regret is the things I did in the past I regret, and hopefully, so I think regret is just that. And then I would hope that the regret would go to something else. I will also say I recognize that there's like words have power, and there are certain words that, okay, I'll just say this one. At my church, we're doing this like revisiting thing, looking at stuff, and I'm very, very, very against having the words Bible believing anywhere on our stuff. Because, just to be clear, I do believe in the Bible. I will never have any of those words written anywhere on publications or websites or Facebook or any of that, because I know when friend or family or whoever calls me up, is like, hey, I'm in this area, I'm looking at this church, what do you think? I look them up and like Control F, Bible believing. I'm like, nope, don't go there, because dog whistle. Yeah, exactly. I know what that stands for. So in this meeting, somebody said, well, just because others have a negative, I don't know what they said, impression of it, or just because you have a negative impression of it doesn't mean that we can't redeem that word. And I said, yes, not in this way. Like, yes, I would love for us to be able to say, yeah, we believe in the Bible, and that means that we love all people, and not just love them and not just welcome them, but like actually affirm and bring them in and do all that stuff. And so we came up with other words to say. So I get that, and I get the way that the church universal for millennia has abused guilt and shame, and that there are some folks that are no longer able to use that word, or no longer able to see that word as anything other than harmful. And I will say, like, I grieve that, and I hate that that is a thing. I often will like watch certain TV channels so that I know what I'm up against. I'm like, hey, this is what most people in the world think of the church, and that's not what I want us to be.
The thing I really wanted to think about with shame, the reason shame isn't ever helpful to me is that it never actually leads to change. It is only a self-deprecating, self-destructive thing. It like, whereas we've used guilt and feeling bad or regret a couple times, and those are things that in the contexts that we've mentioned them, those are things that lead somewhere positive. And I think my problem with shame is that it never leads anywhere positive. It is just a dark spiral of feeling bad about things, trying to do better, and maybe doing a little bit better, but as soon as you do bad again, whatever, it just goes right back down the hole. And you can never get quite out of that kind of spiral as long as shame is the thing it is.
I have a hypothesis.
Go ahead, Kelly.
And I don't know how to prove it except to say, like, let's hear some comments about it. I have a hypothesis that the world of people that were not born and raised in the church have a different opinion of guilt than people who were born and raised in the church. And here's why. Guilt in the church is, now follow me, talked about. Because both of you are saying guilt's not entirely bad. Guilt leads to change. Like guilt, like both of you are saying. I don't agree, but I would argue that I'm probably, of the three of us, more secular than either of you at this point in our lives, right? So guilt like has a necessity because Jesus died for the guilt of the sinners, took the guilt away, blah, blah, blah. Like there's a lot of redemptive pieces built around the word guilt and like all of that. So like there is some redemptiveness to it. Guilt in the secular world, in the non-church world, necessitates punishment. Like guilt's a legal term that necessitates punishment. Like there's no other option. If you're found guilty of something, there will be punishment, period. So I genuinely wonder if there's a distinction there for people and how they are raised in the understanding of a word, like how much culturally that impacts the understanding of the word.
Yeah, I'm reflecting on what you said. I don't think that secularly guilt is always requiring of a punishment. I'm thinking of people like, oh, guilty. Who brought the cupcakes? Oh, guilty. That was me. So, like, I think guilt is more taking responsibility of.
In what scenario does that actually happen in real life?
And I've seen it at like kids' birthday parties or when I was a teacher, and like weird people that are like, oh, who brought the cupcakes into the break room?
But when they say guilty, like it's like in a oops, sorry, my bad kind of way. It still has like that. Yeah, like that's still what I'm saying.
It still has a
like,
negative
still got that
connotation. Like, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's that I'm the tempter with these cookies or these cupcakes. I'm the tempter who brought them and put them in front of you.
Yeah, I don't think guilt is ever put in a positive light. Yeah, so name of our podcast. Guilt is never in a positive light. So what? Like, feeling bad is never in a positive light. I mean, you could make the argument that like feeling bad about something could bring about a positive change.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had another thought when you were talking through that about kind of the blindness that I have of that word guilt. And I know that it definitely has a lot of baggage that it brings with it. And I'm realizing that that baggage, especially in the church world, is a relatively new thing. Like the last 100 to 200 years, 200 years or less is really when a lot of that shift kind of came in. Yeah, so I don't know how much this has to do with what we're talking about. Maybe it does. So I'll go ahead and say it. And if it's wrong, Britt, you can just cut it out. Feel free to leave this on the cutting room floor. So that whole guilt thing, like we're guilty of sin and Jesus came to save us. So for the last little while, 200 years, we'll say, 10% of Christendom, the focus has been on that. To make other Christians so that when they die, they go to heaven. Or to say that a different way, let's make other Christians so that when they die, they don't go to hell. So our job is to deliver people from hell when they die. And so it's real easy, and I would say it's lazy, to only do that, or even ever to do that. All you got to do is whatever, and then, like pray the sinner's prayer or whatever other garbage that people do. But we never focus, or we spend too little time focusing on delivering people from the hell they're living in today, which, because I'm a Bible believing Christian and I read the stuff that I'm supposed to read, and that's what this faith should be about, is helping those around us. So, yeah, I think guilting people into a belief, whatever that is, whether it's a religious belief, whether it's a political belief, whether it's a whatever, doing it out of fear is, I think, disingenuous. And I think it's a really lazy way of doing it.
I mean, I agree. I think it's lazy, but I think it's also so damn effective that people.
Yeah, no, it's real effective.
People, it feels like it's like the easiest thing to jump to, and I feel like I see it everywhere. Like it's easy for me that my bias points towards the church just because of the time spent there and the feelings, the baggage that it's lumped on top of me. But it seems to be everywhere as the simplest means to convince people that you're right is to make them feel guilty or shame for whatever they're doing. I mean, the number of even something as simple as like, how you choose to eat, or how you choose, how much exercise you choose to have, or how much screen time you choose to let your kids have or not let your kids have. That it feels like it's the quickest place humans jump in order to convince people or get them to follow a particular set of rules for the world or the life or whatever.
I mean, I can't count the number of times that I've heard someone say or read someone say, I couldn't live with myself if I let my gay neighbor or gay friend think that I condoned their lifestyle. Like, what if they went to hell because I didn't love them enough to tell them the truth about what they were doing?
Yeah.
I couldn't live with myself. I mean, that's guilt and okay.
I mean, I think we all agree that like shame is not good. I don't know what there is to talk about.
So did we solve it? Is that what that means? We solved it. We're good now.
Is that the goal? Is to solve things?
So how do y'all deal with shame?
I'm in process for beginning to learn how to let it go. I think I've made some good progress in my life, but I feel like I have to kind of constantly stay aware and decide whether or not, or discern whether or not I'm feeling or beginning to feel shame for something. So, that is definitely a piece for me. Something I beginning to try and focus on is remembering that there's a lot of things that I can't change, and because I can't change them, aren't really worth holding on to, allowing them to affect or twist my own self, my emotional state, my perception of myself, so that I don't have to waste energy on things that aren't benefiting, well, aren't benefiting me to some way and helping me grow, etc. So I don't know. How do you deal with shame?
Not very well. So I wonder if it's part of like how I deal with imposter syndrome. You know, we talked last month about imposter syndrome, and I said like trying to listen to the true thoughts rather than the false thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the big ones for me is realizing like where my self-worth comes from, and like there's very little that should affect my self-worth. Trying to separate I made a decision and that doesn't make me a bad person.
Yeah.
I do my best. So this is something that I've started doing is I've gotten better at recognizing when things happen that in the past had the tendency to make me feel shameful, and that I confront them right away. I was at a meeting earlier this week and, surprise, I said something that I spoke before I thought it completely through. And when I finished, I was like, hey, I feel like that came out the wrong way. I was not meaning da 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 da. And the person that I was speaking to said, so no, don't worry about it. No, I didn't take it that way. And I was like, okay, I would rather apologize when I don't need to than not apologize and have it be a thing. So, Kelly, I don't know if you heard the question, but okay. How do you deal with shame?
A couple of different ways. Taking space from the things that normally cause shame, I think is important. If you know there are things that are triggering shame for you, getting space from it. Because when you are less familiar with, like when you're used to it, you don't always realize it's happening. You get some space, and if you're back in it and you're like, oh, that's what that is, then you can start working on when that comes up. So that's the first thing. And then reminding yourself that those thoughts don't have to have power if you don't want them to. I think so. I work with the queer community and religious recovery. So obviously I work with a lot of shame. And in my life and in the life of the people that I work with and the life of like my friends, right? So like it's everywhere. Kind of try to remind people that I think people want to like villainize their thoughts sometimes, and we don't need to. Your thoughts are there maybe maladaptively, but they were there to like keep you safe. Your interpretation of the things that people have said were there for a reason. And you don't have to do that anymore. You don't have to hold on to those opinions that people gave you anymore. But like not shaming yourself for holding on to the shame is important too, because that happens a lot.
Yeah. So I realized that I deal with a lot of other people's shame, and I think I need to be more explicit about, hey, you don't need to feel shame about the guilt that you're feeling, or naming, hey, this is some religious trauma stuff that you're dealing with. You don't know, we don't do that anymore, or at least we shouldn't do that anymore. That's not a thing. Yeah, a lot of it is this weird, I don't know if y'all have ever experienced this, but I know that I do in the church world often. People feel like because they are Christians, they should everything. They should do everything and not have any boundaries and not say no to people and it's just, no, it's okay to say no. It's okay to have boundaries. The big one is around previous hurt, whatever that looks like. So I shared this with a person a couple weeks ago that they had a lot of religious trauma and they were wondering when it was going to be gone completely. And I said, never. I said, just like an old football injury tells you when it's going to rain, there are some things that just don't ever heal. And I don't know if that's completely true, but in my experience, I think it is pretty true. And that at least giving the person permission to, yeah, today I'm really angry with whatever. Yeah, okay, be angry, feel your feelings. And I have this, I think everything is okay to a point, and when it becomes whatever word we want to use, debilitating or overwhelming or all consuming, that's when it becomes an issue that we need to deal with. Your loved one just passed away. Yeah, grieve, be sad. If that goes on for a decade, then yeah, we need to figure that out. Most folks say that deep grieving should not go on that long. And so that's not my expertise. Let me give you a couple of phone numbers of people that you can call. I know we started talking about shame and I ended up with religious trauma, but
it's odd how they're tied together all the time.
Yeah. Oh, I got such a fun job undoing all the. It's my job solely is to undo all the religious
Do you feel
harm
shame for
of
that?
the past 2,000 years. No, I'm not shamed at all. No, I'm good at it. I'm not overwhelmed. I don't feel any. No, actually, I don't, because I'm pretty good about. I do what I can do.
Well, and this is. I feel like
So,
this topic. We could probably tell stories well past all of our bedtimes
yeah.
about how this has affected us and the
Mm-hmm.
spaces we have been in or are in. And I feel like it's one of those very human conditions that, you know, we have this tendency to heap things upon ourselves that really were not ours to carry in the first place, and we should be able to just let them
Yeah.
go. I hope, I mean, in all honesty for myself, I hope anybody listening that struggles with shame, whether it's from a religious context or a social context, takes the time to just step back from it, like Kelly said, and not allow themselves to not have to feel that, to not have to carry that, because it is a heavy burden, even for the
Yeah.
littlest things. It seems like it is one of those things that it's just more and more weight that you're piling on top of yourself.
Yeah, I do want to acknowledge that as Kelly was talking about the shame that she was made to feel through the trauma of the church, like you were breaking up like crazy, and I think I know what you were saying, but then it was like awkward. We were staring at each other for a while, and then your screen went blank, and so we moved
Sorry.
on to Britt. Yeah, that's not, no. I just didn't want to feel ashamed that we didn't acknowledge that you said something, and then we are like, all right,
Well,
Britt, what do you think? Like,
sorry, because I heard what Britt
go
said, and
ahead.
then I felt bad. See, I mean, this is my terminology, right?
Oh
I
no.
felt bad because I knew you had
Yeah.
heard like enough of what I
Yeah,
said to then feel like, well, I don't have a right to say what I feel. You know what I mean? Like I heard it and I was, see, that's not what I was trying to say though. But this is the piece that when you asked if I felt shame, you know what's super interesting to me is the thing that kicked all of this off for the three of us to like just kind of like sit down and rap about some of this stuff was when we talked about purity culture on my YouTube channel. And when we
yeah,
all sort of
Yeah.
talked about
yeah,
and head knowledge knew how hard it was for women with purity culture, how hard it was for men with purity culture, but really talked about what those experiences looked like for each of us growing up in and being involved in purity culture. So the shame piece for me of being a woman growing up in the church, being queer, working in the church, and you know, all of those pieces, it's not a day went by without me feeling shame. And then there was the piece of feeling shame for being in the church as a queer person because I felt like I was betraying the rest of my queer family who were harmed by the church. So,
yeah,
like, there was, yeah. So, I mean, my answer was yes. But there was like all those different layers, was what I was trying to explain,
yeah,
you know? But
yeah. I almost asked a really stupid question. So I almost said that is the time that others made you feel ashamed. Or were there any times that were like legitimate times that you should feel shame? And then I realized, oh wait, no, we said that there are no legitimate times.
Thank
to
you
feel
for
ashamed.
illegitimizing my shame, Kevin. I really appreciate that.
That is exactly what I was meaning.
But isn't that what we're trying to do? Is illegitimize everybody's shame? No, I mean illegitimize in the sense that if we said that people shouldn't need to feel shame, that's not a healthy space. So here's me putting my foot in my mouth, is that I don't think I mean illegitimize. What I mean is break it apart.
Hold on, let me pause you real quick. Fix
my dumbness.
For those of you listening on the podcast and don't have the video, I don't think that Kelly's eyebrows should be any higher right now. She's waiting.
She should know me well enough to know exactly what is happening.
Raised eyebrows, pursed lips. Doing that. That's me right now.
So the funny thing is,
this is my
I think I know what Britt wants to say.
Thank you, Kevin.
And I think I know what Kelly's response is going to be.
Do not help him, Kevin.
But I'm just going to
not help him.
So
don't help. So
no.
Illegitimize is not the right word, but the way that shame has been used to damage people, whether as a weapon by others to damage or a weapon we turn on ourselves, that needs to be dismantled. That thing needs to be illegitimized. That piece where it's used as a weapon, where it is used for us to wound ourselves. It is used by religious organizations to control and wound others. It's used politically to control and manipulate. It's used socially to control and manipulate. That's the part of shame that I would hope, and maybe isn't actually realistic for this to happen. Maybe this is a little bit of pie in the sky, but I would hope could find its way to not being a thing anymore. And I think that's the part I want delegitimized. Not so much that people shouldn't have felt shame or that they didn't feel shame, but so much so that it shouldn't have been a thing in the first place. And there is something after shame. There is freedom somewhere out there that isn't a space where we've been wounded ourselves, been wounded by others. And that's the space I hope. Well, I think, speaking for myself, that's the space I hope I can get to. Because I recognize in myself the amount of time that I have wasted, the amount of emotional energy I have wasted beating myself up for things I didn't need to beat myself up for. And I know that Kevin, you said the thing about the Pain Olympics and stuff. If I'm doing the comparison thing and saying, well, I have this amount of shame and guilt and stuff that I've beat myself up with in the past, there are other people that have had even more of that or more layers of that. And I know the damage it's done to me. And I have this desire, this want to undo that damage. And I mean, Kevin, you mentioned it is, trying to, you made a joke about trying to undo all the damage the church has done. You one pastor trying to do that. But for a long time, that's what I was trying to do in the church myself before I beat up myself or got beaten up too much to do it anymore. And I don't know that for every person finding a spiritual place to find that freedom is a possibility. But I hope they find some place where they can find that freedom from the weight of shame. And I hope I've now corrected the foot in my mouth.
You did a good job.
I think saying like, I'm trying to remember the exact words. I should have wrote it down. There's a difference between saying nobody should feel pain or nobody should feel ashamed and acknowledging that some people have been made to feel ashamed. Yeah.
I think the challenge we've had with this podcast, or the challenge that some of our podcast members have had with this podcast, is that we talk about some really deep issues and there's no we're not handing a resolution. And that's what I love about our podcast, is that we're not trying to resolve, because there are things that are not resolvable, and we're introducing information or just discussing these bigger issues and essentially normalizing discussing these bigger issues for people. And that, for me anyway, has been like the real life feedback I've gotten from people, is that it just kind of feels like three friends sitting down and talking about real stuff, which is literally what it is. So that's good. But I think the piece this podcast plays in that sort of dream a dream that you were just talking about, Britt, is that the more people talk about this type of thing, and the more people talk about the reality of what it has been in their lives to feel shame, to feel guilt, to pull apart those things, to figure out what the definition of any of that is, and what does it mean for them, and can you let go of these things, and can you heal from it, and how. The more people talk about that, the bigger chance there is that the healing can come for them. And then the bigger chance there is that the systemic issues get resolved. Because the question that Kevin asked in the beginning, as far as those words being irredeemable, my answer was no, because of the way the system is set up at this point. And I don't know if you guys saw that YouTube video that I did about why I don't talk about affirming churches. And that is the same thing about these words in reality. I feel the same way about these words, is the system is flawed, and until the system is fixed, those words don't work. And so the system can't change until people are not afraid to talk about it. So that's the part, even with the lack of ability to resolve, here you go, we fixed it, like you were saying earlier, we can't fix this, obviously, but the normalization of the conversation hopefully helps people to normalize it in their lives, to then move forward and work to change the system so that other generations of people don't have to have these conversations.
One of the biggest compliments I ever got as a pastor was somebody said, the thing I love about this church is that it's not black and white, that there is so much gray. And while some pastors admittedly would be like, no, it is all black and white, I just fundamentally disagree with that. And so, this podcast is not black and white. It is all gray. Yeah, we can talk on here and we're friends and we don't always disagree.
That too.
I said we don't always disagree. That might have been a Freudian slip there. Yeah, so we don't always disagree. Well, occasionally we agree, but we still are friends. Even though Kelly doesn't reply to...
I've been really bad the last couple weeks. That is very true.
Text.
I know.
Yeah. Even though Kelly has yet to invite me to their house, the New Year's celebration that I've heard so much about, and I have not been invited to it. So, but that's okay. That's okay. You should.
You have a lot of kids. Could you really come up for New Year's, for real?
I would love to be able to tell you no, but at least be
fair
invited.
Enough.
So.
Well, forewarning, we have a 4th of July celebration every year, and you will be invited to that. You can feel free to say no, but you will be invited to that.
I will do what I can. Yeah, and I will feel ashamed if I
can't stop you, but I would encourage you to not feel like you have to feel that way. We're so healthy.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, we are. That's the definition. Yeah, all healthy. Yeah. All right.
That's a great place to end for the month.
I appreciate the conversation, y'all. Yeah. And so I've been begging since we started for us to say that y'all can find us anywhere pods are cast. And both Britt and Kelly don't like my joke. So I said it, wherever pods are cast.
Bye.
Yes, Kevin, that's right. Everywhere pods are cast, and on social media at So What Pod on both Instagram and TikTok. Y'all, I hope you had a great month, and we look forward to hanging out and chatting again in April. Bye.